You think a $10 gift card is just a cheap insult from a terrible boss. I thought so too. Until I scratched off the silver foil and typed the code into my phone. It turns out that pathetic $10 was the master key to a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud ring. This ruthless war started over a single cup of coffee, but the price my boss paid for crossing me was his entire career and his freedom. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Boss Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our monetization, leaving us with zero budget to keep operating. So if you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team to cover their living expenses and continue creating these stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. My name is Ember Alexander. I am 32 years old, and for the last 8 years, I have been the Project Operations Manager at Aeronova Logistics, right here in the freezing, wind-whipped heart of Chicago. If you do not know what a Project Operations Manager does in a major logistics firm, let me translate the corporate jargon for you. I am the designated janitor for every catastrophic supply chain mess this company manages to create. Whenever a massive shipment of industrial parts gets stranded in a port, or a fleet of delivery trucks suddenly breaks down during a holiday rush, I am the one pulling all-nighters, screaming into my headset, and fixing the problem while the upper management sleeps soundly in their sprawling suburban mansions. I have poured 8 years of my youth, my energy, and my sanity into a corporate machine that barely even bothered to learn my last name. I never expected a grand parade for my 8-year work anniversary in the toxic wastelands of corporate America. Unwavering loyalty is usually just rewarded with a heavier workload and a polite pat on the back. But even with my incredibly low expectations, what my direct boss, Regional Director Julian Vance, pulled off was nothing short of a calculated insult. Julian is the kind of executive who wears custom-tailored suits that cost more than my monthly rent, yet possesses the management skills of a rusty paperclip. He called a sudden team meeting in the employee break room. The air in there constantly smelled like burnt microwave popcorn, stale coffee, and quiet desperation. He stood proudly in front of the peeling whiteboard, flashed his signature condescending smile, and cleared his throat. "Everyone, please gather around," Julian announced, his voice dripping with forced, theatrical enthusiasm. "Today, we are celebrating a very special milestone. Ember has been with us for 8 long years, keeping the gears turning. We absolutely could not do it without you. Kiddo." Kiddo, I was 32 years old, actively managing a multi-million-dollar operational budget, and this man stood there and called me kiddo. I stood still, waiting for the actual punchline. A promotion to senior management, a performance bonus, even a genuine, professionally written letter of recommendation would have sufficed. Instead, Julian reached into his expensive blazer pocket and flicked a small, glossy piece of plastic across the sticky break room table. It slid across the surface and came to a halt, right in front of my hands. "Go treat yourself to a nice cup of coffee," he said, winking at me as if he had just handed me the keys to a brand new luxury vehicle. "You have certainly earned it." I looked down. It was a preloaded coffee shop gift card. The amount printed clearly on the back in cheap black ink was exactly $10. Not 100, not 50, 10, in downtown Chicago. $10 barely covers a large espresso drink and a mediocre muffin. I looked at the flimsy piece of plastic, then slowly looked up at Julian. His eyes held that smug, superior gleam of a man who thoroughly enjoyed reminding his subordinates exactly how little they mattered in his grand scheme. My blood boiled instantly. The sheer audacity of this man. Reducing 8 years of blood, sweat, and missed holidays to a piece of plastic worth less than a single hour of minimum wage was staggering. The rage building inside my chest was a physical pressure, pressing sharply against my ribs. But I did not scream. I did not throw the cheap card directly at his perfectly styled hair. I simply smiled. It was a tight, practiced, dead-eyed corporate smile that I had perfected over the years. "Thank you so much, Julian," I said smoothly, my voice dangerously calm. "I really appreciate your generosity." I took the card, turned on my heel, walked back to my cramped cubicle, and sat down heavily in my stiff, ergonomic chair. My hands were shaking slightly from the suppressed anger. I needed an espresso, a triple shot, just to keep myself from marching right back into his glass-walled office and quitting on the spot. I flipped the pathetic card over, scratched off the silver foil with my thumbnail, and pulled out my smartphone. I downloaded the coffee shop chain's official application, intending to load the digital funds so I could order ahead and escape the suffocating office air for at least 15 minutes. I carefully typed the 16-digit code into the application and hit the submit button. Then something entirely unexpected happened. Instead of the screen flashing with a measly $10 balance, the application froze entirely. The loading wheel spun frantically for a few seconds. A bright red security warning popped up across the screen, demanding an identity verification. I frowned, leaning closer to my phone. That was completely wrong. Standard retail gift cards bought with cash off a grocery store rack do not trigger high-level security protocols. I tapped the alert, trying to bypass it. The system glitched, throwing me into a bizarre digital loop. As it turned out, this specific promotional card was not bought as a standalone item at a register. It had been electronically generated and extracted directly from an anonymous corporate credit card account that was deeply linked to the application's backend. For a few agonizing seconds, the application lagged badly, struggling to sync the conflicting security credentials between my personal phone and the corporate server. And in that brief window of digital confusion, the firewall entirely dropped. The screen refreshed, completely bypassing my empty personal wallet and loading the master transaction dashboard of the parent account. My breath caught sharply in my throat. I stared at my glowing screen, my eyes frantically scanning the endless rows of data materializing before me. This was not a normal petty cash expense account used for buying office bagels and morning coffees. It was a massive corporate credit line, and the transaction history was miles long. I scrolled down slowly, the numbers blurring together before snapping into terrifyingly sharp focus. Every single week, massive outbound payments were being authorized. The amounts were absolutely staggering. $50,000, $85,000, sometimes over $120,000 in a single wire transfer. But the money was not going to any established shipping vendor or port authority that I recognized. Every single cent of those massive payments was being steadily funneled into a freight carrier company named Vanguard Freight. I froze. I had personally memorized our entire logistics network. I knew every partner, every third-party vendor, and every independent contractor Aeronova Logistics had done business with over the last 8 years. Vanguard Freight did not exist anywhere in our official system. It was a ghost, a highly profitable, incredibly expensive ghost. And the master account authorizing these massive, bleeding payouts was registered right under Julian Vance's name. The rest of the afternoon blurred into a dizzying rush of adrenaline. I did not leave my desk. I did not take a lunch break. Instead, I activated my administrative credentials and quietly slipped into the deep archive servers of our regional database. My hands flew across the keyboard, cross-referencing the transaction identification numbers I had memorized from that glitching coffee application with our official corporate bills of lading. It took me nearly 3 hours to untangle the digital web, but when I finally breached the protected vendor registry, the ugly truth stared back at me in stark, glowing green text. Vanguard Freight was not a partner. It was a perfectly constructed parasite. I started pulling the manifest records from the past 12 months. Julian had orchestrated a brilliant, sickeningly simple phantom shipping network. Here is exactly how his scam worked. Aeronova Logistics offered our top-tier corporate clients a premium service called the Green Energy Transport Initiative. Clients paid an extra 35% markup to guarantee their goods were transported exclusively by zero-emission electric vehicle fleets and carbon-neutral freight trains. Major corporations loved it for their public relations campaigns, but the internal records showed that whenever a client booked this premium green service, Julian manually intercepted the dispatch codes. He diverted those lucrative contracts directly to Vanguard Freight, Vanguard would then turn around and subcontract the absolute cheapest, dirtiest, most unregulated diesel truck fleets on the highway to actually move the cargo. The clients paid top dollar for clean energy. The diesel drivers got paid pennies on the dollar, and Vanguard Freight swallowed the massive profit margin. Julian even went as far as generating completely fabricated environmental impact reports. He sent glossy digital files to our clients, showing them exactly how many metric tons of carbon emissions they had saved by using our premium service, while in reality, his hired rust bucket trucks were spewing thick black exhaust across the interstate. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking, and since Vanguard was nothing but a shell company registered to Julian, he was effectively stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars right out from under the company board's nose. I was just beginning to download the routing histories when a company-wide urgent notification flashed across my monitor. The email came directly from the Global Board of Directors. The subject line was simply titled, Leadership Transition. I opened it, and the air in the room seemed to physically shift, effective immediately. Aeronova Logistics had appointed a brand new chief executive officer. His name was Marcus Sterling. Anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes reading financial news knows exactly who Marcus Sterling is. He was not a traditional logistics manager. He was a corporate executioner. Boards of directors only hired him when a company was bleeding money and needed an aggressive, immediate turnaround. His reputation was terrifying. He was famous for walking into bloated, corrupt regional offices, tearing their financial statements down to the studs, and ruthlessly firing anyone who could not account for every single cent of their operational budget. A cold wave of dark satisfaction washed over me. Julian had built a fragile house of cards, and a Category 5 hurricane was about to make landfall. Less than 20 minutes after the email went out, my desk phone rang. It was Julian. His voice lacked its usual arrogant drawl. He sounded tight, breathless, and bordering on frantic. He demanded I come to his office immediately. When I walked through his glass door, I saw him pacing frantically behind his massive oak desk. He was sweating right through his expensive silk shirt. He did not even offer me a seat before he started talking rapidly. "Ember, listen to me," Julian said, his eyes darting toward the hallway before he aggressively snapped the window blinds shut. "This new chief executive officer situation is going to cause a lot of unnecessary chaos. Sterling is notorious for sending in his attack dog auditors before he even visits a branch in person. They are going to be crawling all over our regional ledgers by the end of the week." I kept my expression entirely neutral, folding my hands politely in front of me. "Is there a problem with our ledgers, Julian?" He stopped pacing and glared at me with wild, desperate eyes. "Do not play naive with me right now. We run a highly complex network here. Sometimes funds get reallocated to keep things moving. We both know the third quarter financial reports are an absolute mess. I need you to go into the master system and clean them up." "Clean them up?" I asked, raising an eyebrow in feigned confusion. "You mean alter the finalized supply chain expense reports?" Julian stepped closer, leaning heavily over his desk, his voice dropping to a menacing, venomous whisper. "I mean, you need to balance the missing cash flow margins immediately, bury the discrepancies in the miscellaneous maintenance budgets, because let me make this crystal clear for you. Ember, you are the project operations manager. Your digital signature is on the final approval for every routing system in this branch. If Sterling's audit team finds a massive gaping hole in the transportation budget, the legal liability falls squarely on the person managing the software. That is you. If I go down, I guarantee you will be wearing handcuffs long before I do." The threat hung heavily in the stale, tense air between us. He was deliberately cornering me, using my own job title as a weapon to force me into becoming his active accomplice. He truly believed I was just a frightened, obedient middle management drone who would desperately scramble to cover his tracks just to save my own skin. I looked him dead in the eyes, swallowed my disgust, and offered him a slow, reassuring nod. "I understand completely, Julian," I said softly, projecting absolute submission. "I will make sure the third quarter reports reflect exactly what you need them to show. No one will find any discrepancies." He exhaled a long, shaky breath of relief. completely blind to the trap I was already setting. I left his office, returned to my desk, and waited. I waited until the sun went down. I waited until the overnight cleaning crew finished their rounds at 8 o'clock in the evening, once the entire floor was silent, dark, and empty. I got to work. I did exactly what he asked me to do. I went into the official corporate system and meticulously scrubbed the records, masking the Vanguard freight transactions under thick layers of fake maintenance fees and fabricated weather delay costs. But I only did that to the front-facing server. While Julian slept comfortably in his luxury high-rise apartment, I spent the next 4 hours routing a massive, heavy data stream out of the building. My heart hammered against my ribs with a heavy, rhythmic thud. Every time the office air conditioning kicked on, I jumped, half expecting building security to shine a flashlight over my cubicle wall. The progress bar on my monitor crawled agonizingly slowly. 10%, 40%, 75%. I knew that if the automated security protocols ran a random bandwidth sweep while I was extracting this much raw data, my terminal would be flagged immediately. But I held my breath and watched the numbers climb. I copied every single raw, unedited invoice, every original green energy contract, and every diverted diesel truck manifest. I built a secure bridge and transferred the entire catastrophic history of Julian's fraud straight into an anonymous, heavily encrypted cloud server that I had purchased under a fake name. I was not just backing up the data, I was loading a digital weapon. Julian thought he was brilliantly forcing me to bury his dirty secrets, but all he really did was give me unrestricted administrative access to gather all the ammunition I would ever need to destroy him. The storm hit our Chicago headquarters on a miserable, gray Tuesday morning. Marcus Sterling did not walk into the building. He invaded it. He arrived with a strike team of 6 senior auditors, all wearing sharp, identical charcoal suits and carrying heavy metal briefcases. The moment they stepped off the elevator on the 9th floor, the usual hum of office gossip died instantly. The atmosphere turned suffocating, thick with the very real dread of a corporate execution. People stopped breathing. Sterling set up his command center in the main executive boardroom, pulling the blinds tight and demanding physical copies of every single ledger from the past 24 months. Julian immediately went into a state of aggressive self-preservation. His first tactical move was to completely isolate me. For 8 years, I had sat beside him in every major operational briefing, providing the actual data while he smiled for the clients. Now, suddenly, I was locked out. He deliberately omitted my name from the calendar invites for the strategic review meetings. Through the glass walls of his office, I watched him violently wave his hands, taking absolute credit for all my successful supply chain optimizations. Whenever the auditors pointed out the alarming 25% budget overruns from the previous year, Julian masterfully threw the junior logistics coordinators and dock workers under the bus, claiming their gross incompetence was draining the company resources. I did not complain. I did not fight for my seat at the table. I sat quietly in my cramped cubicle, typing away, playing the part of the obedient, invisible office drone to absolute perfection. But while Julian was busy playing politics in the boardroom, I was playing chess in the shadows. On Wednesday evening, right after the clock struck 6, I packed up my bag and walked 3 blocks down the street to a crowded, noisy diner. I ordered a black coffee, opened a cheap, refurbished laptop I had bought with cash months ago, and connected to their completely unsecured public wireless network. I did not send Sterling the entire Vanguard freight archive. Handing over the whole puzzle at once would make it too easy for Julian's expensive corporate lawyers to claim the data was hacked and tampered with. Instead, I gave the auditors a single, highly strategic breadcrumb. Using a masked email address routed through 3 different virtual private networks, I sent a short message directly to the lead auditor's secure inbox. Attached was a single screenshot of a shipping manifest showing a massive cost discrepancy for a standard local route. The text of the email was brief. It simply read, "Look closely at the secondary subcontractor routing layers on the green energy accounts." The fallout was beautifully instantaneous. 48 hours later, during the Friday morning executive briefing. I watched the scene unfold from my desk. The lead auditor slid a printed piece of paper across the table. Even through the soundproof glass, I could read the absolute panic radiating from Julian's body. The auditor was asking sharp, surgical questions about the exact supply chain costs I had anonymously flagged. Julian physically recoiled. His confident posture collapsed. He stammered wildly, his face turning a blotchy red as he desperately tried to pivot the conversation. I watched him pull a silk handkerchief from his pocket and frantically wipe the heavy beads of sweat rolling down his forehead right in the middle of the briefing. Julian was a lot of things, but he was not entirely stupid. He walked out of that meeting knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that someone inside his own building had just painted a target on his back. His paranoia spiked immediately. He knew he could not use the internal tech department to investigate, because they were now reporting directly to the new chief executive officer. So, he quietly broke protocol. He secretly hired a private, external IT contractor and snuck him into the building through the freight elevator on Saturday morning. He paid the guy out of pocket to run a shadow sweep of the entire ninth-floor network, desperately hunting for the rat who had accessed the restricted vendor files. But I had fully anticipated his paranoia. When you spend 8 years cleaning up someone else's messes, you learn exactly how their brain works. On the night I had breached the deep archive and copied the fraudulent data, I did not just use my own administrative credentials. I had utilized a backdoor protocol to bounce my digital footprint, wrapping my access history in the login signature of a man named Todd. Todd was an incredibly arrogant, loud-mouthed warehouse manager in a completely different department who constantly stole credit from his night shift workers and openly mocked my logistical plans. I deliberately left a messy, obvious trail of digital breadcrumbs leading straight to Todd's desktop terminal on the ground floor. I watched from the corner of my eye as the private IT contractor finally handed Julian a printed network log late Monday afternoon. Julian snatched the paper. His eyes scanned the highlighted text. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated venom. He glared violently through his office window, his eyes burning with absolute hatred, staring straight down toward the warehouse loading dock where Todd was currently yelling at a forklift driver. Julian's attention, his rage, and his paranoia were now entirely locked onto the wrong target, while the real threat sat quietly just 20 feet away, peacefully organizing file folders and waiting for the final act to begin. I thought I had brilliantly outmaneuvered him. I genuinely believed that planting the fake digital footprint leading to the warehouse manager had bought me all the crucial time I needed to let the audit run its natural course. I was so confident in my tactical misdirection that I completely underestimated the chilling depths of Julian's paranoia. I did not know that 3 months prior, under the guise of severe seasonal allergies, he had successfully requisitioned a top-of-the-line air purification tower for the main corridor. He specifically requested maintenance to place it in the corner, giving it a direct, unobstructed line of sight straight into my cubicle. Hidden perfectly inside the sleek, black plastic grating of that expensive machine was a motion-activated microcamera. While I thought I was working entirely undetected in the dead of night, he had been recording me. He reviewed the hidden security footage. He watched me staying late at my desk long after the cleaning crew had left. With the high-definition zoom, he could clearly see the bright reflection of the restricted Vanguard freight shipping manifests scrolling rapidly across my reading glasses in the dark. A normal, rational manager would have confronted me immediately. A slightly more aggressive boss would have just fired me on the spot for unauthorized access. But Julian was neither rational nor normal. He was a trapped, desperate predator. He knew that simply terminating my employment would not stop the auditors from finding the massive financial holes he had dug. So, he decided to strike first with a preemptive counterattack so vicious and thoroughly calculated that it takes my breath away even now. Using his high-level executive clearance, Julian bypassed the standard security protocols and pulled my highly confidential employee file directly from the Human Resources database. He stole my social security number, my home address, my birth date, and a high-resolution scan of my driver's license, Armed with my stolen identity, he quietly opened an offshore, encrypted digital bank account entirely in my name. Then, moving with the speed of a man trying to outrun a burning building, he executed a devastating wire transfer. He moved exactly $50,000 from the Vanguard Freight Illicit Black Fund directly into the forged bank account bearing my name. He carefully manufactured a flawless, undeniable digital paper trail that explicitly painted me as the criminal mastermind. He framed me for accepting massive corporate bribes from our transport partners. The trap violently snapped shut on Thursday morning. I had just arrived at the office and had barely taken a single sip of my morning tea when a heavy, suffocating presence loomed over me. Two massive men wearing matching dark navy security blazers materialized at the exact same time at the entrance of my narrow workspace. They did not politely ask me to come with them. The taller one stepped forward, placed a heavy hand firmly on my desk, and instructed me to step away from my keyboard immediately. Before I could even push my chair back, my computer monitor went completely black. My network access, my email, and my operational credentials were simultaneously terminated. They flanked me closely on both sides and marched me aggressively through the absolute center of the main floor. The loud, chaotic hum of the morning rush died instantly. Every single employee stopped typing. The silence was absolutely deafening as I was paraded like a dangerous criminal past rows of shocked faces. I was escorted directly to the Executive Human Resources conference room on the top floor. When the heavy oak doors swung open, the air conditioning inside the room felt like freezing winter wind. Marcus Sterling, the new chief executive officer, sat perfectly still at the head of the massive mahogany table. His face was a mask of carved, unforgiving stone. Next to him sat the global head of the internal legal department, meticulously organizing a thick stack of printed financial statements. And sitting quietly in the far corner of the room was Julian. He was putting on an absolute masterclass in theatrical deception. He hung his head low, resting his face in his hands, his shoulders slumped forward in a highly exaggerated display of profound heartbreak and sorrow. As the security guards forced me into the uncomfortable leather chair directly opposite Sterling, Julian let out a long, heavy, tragic sigh. He perfectly played the role of the devastated, supportive mentor whose deeply trusted subordinate of 8 years had suddenly and brutally stabbed him in the back for pure greed. Sterling did not waste a single second on pleasantries. He aggressively slid the forged banking statements directly across the smooth surface of the table until they hit my hands. His voice echoed with cold, hard finality as he laid out the accusations. He informed me that they had undeniable proof of my extensive corruption. He officially announced my immediate suspension without pay, the permanent revocation of my security clearances, and the impending involvement of federal economic police regarding the $50,000 of stolen company funds. I was staring directly down the barrel of a 10-year federal prison sentence. I was facing the absolute, unrecoverable destruction of my entire professional reputation and my freedom. The room was heavy, waiting for me to break down. They expected tears. They expected frantic, screaming denials. They expected me to beg wildly for my job and my life. Instead, I leaned slowly forward in my chair. I did not shed a single tear. I did not let my hands shake. I let a slow, freezing, razor-sharp smile spread across my face. I completely ignored Julian's pathetic acting routine, locked my eyes directly onto the icy stare of Marcus Sterling, and spoke in a voice entirely devoid of fear. I confidently told the chief executive officer that I completely understood his position, but I requested that he grant me exactly 5 minutes of uninterrupted time to completely flip the board. Marcus Sterling did not immediately agree. He stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes, silently weighing the sheer audacity of my request. In his world, guilty employees usually crumbled instantly under the weight of federal threats. My complete lack of panic clearly threw a wrench into his carefully orchestrated interrogation. The head of legal opened his mouth to object, ready to demand I be escorted out of the building, but Sterling held up a single, authoritative hand, silencing the entire room. "You have exactly 5 minutes, Miss Alexander," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "If you waste my time, I will personally ensure the authorities add obstruction to your growing list of charges." I did not break eye contact. I slowly unclasped my leather purse, deliberately keeping my movements smooth and visible, so the security guard standing behind me would not jump. I bypassed my phone, my keys, and my employee identification badge. Instead, my fingers found a small, flimsy piece of plastic. I pulled it out and placed it gently in the exact center of the massive mahogany table. It was the $10 coffee shop gift card. Julian let out a loud, theatrical scoff. He leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms over his chest in mock disbelief. "Are you entirely out of your mind? Ember, the chief executive officer, just showed you irrefutable evidence of a $50,000 corporate bribe. And your grand defense is a cheap coffee coupon I gave you for your work anniversary. This is absolutely pathetic." I ignored Julian completely. My focus remained entirely locked on Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, what you are looking at is not a standard retail gift card. It is a digital extension." When Julian handed this to me in the break room, he thought it was a brilliant, demeaning joke, but he made a fatal administrative error. This specific promotional card was generated directly from a master corporate credit line, a credit line attached to a shell company known as Vanguard Freight. The air in the room suddenly grew incredibly still. The moment I said the words, Vanguard Freight, the smug, patronizing smirk completely vanished from Julian's face. His skin turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. He uncrossed his arms, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair with sudden, white-knuckled intensity. "I strongly suggest you open the security application on your own smartphone. Mr. Sterling," I continued, gesturing calmly toward the cheap piece of plastic. "Open the barcode scanner feature used for vendor verification. Scan the back of that card." Sterling looked at the card, then looked at Julian's suddenly terrified expression. The chief executive officer was a ruthless man, but he was also a man who followed the data. He reached into his tailored suit pocket, pulled out his device, and opened the secure corporate scanning application. He leaned over the table, aligning the camera with the smeared black barcode on the back of the gift card. A sharp digital chime echoed loudly in the silent room. Sterling looked down at his screen. His eyes narrowed sharply. "Read the registered billing information aloud, please," I requested softly. Sterling cleared his throat, his voice devoid of any emotion, yet carrying the weight of a judge reading a guilty verdict. "The primary account holder for this vendor card is listed as Julian Vance. The registered business address is a private postal box located in the downtown financial district." "That is impossible," Julian stammered loudly, aggressively pushing his chair back from the table. "That application is clearly malfunctioning, or she hacked it. She is the project operations manager. She manipulates software all day long. This is a desperate, pathetic attempt to frame me." "Frame you?" I asked, allowing a sharp, freezing laugh to escape my lips. "Julian, you just accused me of accepting a $50,000 wire transfer from Vanguard Freight. You brought printed bank statements to this meeting to prove it. Mr. Sterling, I have a very simple question for your head of legal. When a wire transfer of that magnitude is initiated, the banking system automatically logs the exact Internet Protocol address of the device that authorized the transaction. It is a mandatory federal banking regulation." The head of legal nodded slowly, his eyes darting between me and the visibly unraveling regional director. "That is correct. We have the digital authorization logs right here in this folder." "Excellent," I said, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the table. "I want you to trace that Internet Protocol address right now. Do not wait for the police. Run the diagnostic trace right here, right now, on your secure laptop." Julian sprang to his feet. His chair tipped backward and crashed violently against the glass wall. "This is an absolute outrage. I will not sit here and allow this criminal to dictate the terms of this investigation. Marcus, we need to call the police immediately and have her removed from the premises." "Sit down, Julian," Sterling commanded. his voice cracking like a physical whip across the room. He did not look at him. He kept his eyes locked on the head of legal. "Run the trace, now." The room descended into a suffocating, agonizing silence. The only sound was the rapid, frantic clicking of the legal director's keyboard. Julian stood frozen, breathing heavily, sweat pouring down his face, completely trapped. It took less than 2 minutes for the trace to complete. The legal director stopped typing. He stared at his laptop screen, his face turning entirely pale. He slowly looked up at Sterling. The authorization for the $50,000 transfer did not come from Miss Alexander's terminal, the legal director stated, his voice trembling slightly. The Internet Protocol address traces back to a private, high-speed wireless router located in a residential penthouse complex on the north side of the city. The exact service address matches Julian Vance's primary residence. Julian completely lost his mind. The carefully constructed facade of the polished, elite corporate executive shattered into a million pieces. He lunged forward, slamming his fists onto the mahogany table. He began screaming hysterically, hurling vicious insults and profanities at me. He claimed I had somehow broken into his apartment, that I had spoofed his router, that I was a psychotic, obsessed subordinate trying to destroy his life because he refused to promote me. His excuses were frantic, contradictory, and utterly pathetic. He was flailing wildly, a drowning man trying to pull everyone else down into the dark water with him. Enough. Marcus Sterling slammed his open palm against the table with such terrifying force that the heavy glass water pitchers rattled violently. The sound instantly severed Julian's hysterical rant. Sterling stood up, his towering frame radiating pure, unadulterated fury. "You think I am a fool, Julian," Sterling hissed, his voice practically vibrating with rage. "You think you can use my auditing team to cover up your sloppy, arrogant theft. You think you can forge documents right under my nose." At that exact second, the massive digital projector mounted on the ceiling of the conference room clicked on with a loud mechanical hum. A brilliant square of harsh white light hit the far wall. I had not just been sitting in my cubicle waiting to be arrested. Before the security guards had dragged me away, I had set a timed, automated email command. Exactly at the 10-minute mark of this meeting, my secure cloud server bypassed the internal firewall and sent the entire Vanguard freight archive directly to the Chief Executive Officer's priority inbox, with a command to auto-display on the room's synchronized presentation screen. Row after row of raw, unedited data suddenly illuminated the dark room. The massive, fraudulent green energy invoices, the diverted diesel truck manifests, the fake environmental impact reports. Every single dollar Julian had stolen over the last 2 years was laid bare in glowing, undeniable numbers. It was a digital graveyard of his entire career, projected 10 feet high for the most ruthless executive in the country to see. I sat back in my chair, smoothing the fabric of my skirt. I looked at Julian, who was now staring at the projected wall with wide, completely hollow eyes. His chest heaved, but no words came out. There were no more lies to spin. The trap had closed perfectly, and the execution was absolute. Marcus Sterling did not utter another word to the pathetic man standing before him. He simply reached for the heavy silver landline phone on the conference table and pressed a single button. Within 3 minutes, the 2 massive security guards who had brought me upstairs were forcefully restraining Julian. They were quickly followed by local economic police officers, who had clearly been on standby in the lobby the moment Marcus started this inquisition. They read Julian his rights loudly and clearly, the heavy metal handcuffs clicking shut around his wrists with a sharp, undeniable finality. He was officially under arrest for massive corporate embezzlement and severe systemic fraud. They dragged him out of the executive suite and paraded him right through the exact center of the main operational floor. It was a beautiful reversal of the horrific walk of shame he had forced me to endure just an hour earlier. Every single employee stood up from their cubicles. No one spoke, but the collective glare of absolute disgust from the very people he had stepped on for years was deafening. As he passed by the central coffee station, Julian dug his heels into the carpet, fighting the officers just long enough to shoot me a look of pure, unadulterated venom. I did not flinch. I did not gloat. I simply picked up a fresh ceramic cup of dark roast coffee from the counter and raised it toward him in a silent, freezing salute. Once the chaotic mess was finally cleared, and the flashing red and blue police lights faded from the street below, Marcus Sterling asked me to return to the boardroom. He did not offer a sweeping, emotional apology for falsely accusing me. In the ruthless upper echelons of corporate America, apologies are useless. Actions and money are the only real currency. Instead, he opened his leather briefcase, pulled out a thick, freshly printed contract, and slid it directly across the table. "The region is yours, Miss Alexander. Clean up the mess," Marcus stated plainly, his eyes reflecting a profound, silent respect. He was offering me the position of regional director, effective immediately. I was taking Julian's empty seat. My new base salary was exactly 3 times what I had been making as a project manager, not including a massive signing bonus and full executive stock options. More importantly, Marcus gave me absolute, unrestricted authority to completely restructure the Chicago branch according to my own strictly transparent standards. I accepted the pen he offered and signed my name on the dotted line without a single second of hesitation. The very next morning, I officially took over the massive corner office. My first executive order was swift and brutal. I permanently abolished the sickening, insulting culture of rewarding hardworking employees with cheap retail gift cards. I immediately implemented a comprehensive profit-sharing policy and a direct cash bonus structure based purely on verifiable performance. If my team bled for this company, they were going to see the actual, tangible financial rewards directly in their bank accounts, not loaded onto a flimsy piece of plastic. I sat deeply into the expensive, plush leather chair behind the massive oak desk, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The chaotic hum of the office outside felt completely different now. It was no longer a toxic trap. It was my empire. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the cheap $10 coffee card one last time. I rubbed the smooth, glossy plastic lightly against the polished edge of my new desk. A genuine, warm smile finally broke across my face. I looked at the little card, thanked it silently for handing me the keys to the kingdom, and dropped it straight down into the roaring teeth of the heavy-duty paper shredder. Thank you so much to everyone for listening to my story today. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you found today's story satisfying and enjoyable, please consider helping us out with just $1 by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by using the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment. Your incredible support is the only way our channel can pay our hardworking team, help them feed their families, and allow us to keep bringing you more amazing stories like this one. Thank you again, and take care.